Today's video is brought to you by AlmostHeaven.com. Handcrafting at-home saunas since 1977. Want better sleep, less stress, and faster recovery? Now's the perfect time. Shop saunas, cold plunges, hybrids, and accessories. Use our exclusive code at checkout to save 5%. Link below.
Bo Parrish, the definition from Merriam-Webster is the quality or state of not thinking you are better than other people. We're talking about the word humility, a modest or low view of one's own importance. And it was months ago I said to you a profound statement which became profound to me and almost an eye-opener. I don't know what I know. And I think a lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for the skills and talents they possess. And sometimes it takes someone else to recognize or point those things out.
Without question, David, just to reiterate the topic of our conversation today on humility. Humility is one of the most admirable character traits that any person could possess. Because if you think about the root of humility, it's everyone in this world has one thing in common, and that is our imperfection or our weaknesses or things that we don't know. Why is it so uncomfortable for us to respond in any other way with a profound, confident answer? Why do we have such a hard time saying, I don't know? So, context for this conversation, as you and I were discussing earlier, over the last 5 days, Marietta and I, my wife, have given birth to twin boys. And we were released from the hospital today after a complicated procedure. It was tough on the front end, but ultimately we felt good enough to make the transition home. But there has never before been a time in my life where I felt so uncomfortable, so helpless, so out of my element than I was these last 5 days in the hospital. Because welcoming babies into the world for the first time, where ultimately they will become to depend on us exclusively, gosh, it's a humbling thought. And even the sheer mechanics of taking care of them when it comes to feeding them. Of course, that's not me. Marietta's doing all the hard work when it comes to feeding, but even small things like handing the babies to her, knowing when the babies have had enough, when to pull them off, and then, gosh, I'll give you an example. There's a specific way to wrap the baby before you put it back into its crib. I had no idea. It took me putting myself in an unfamiliar situation, of course, this one being a necessity. There was no other option and no other joy. Greatest day in my life, no question. But I was uncomfortable. So I surrounded myself, and I wish I could take credit for it, but it was just a product of the system, with knowledgeable nursing staff who studied, who went to school, who did everything they could to teach me how to take care of a newborn baby. Because here I am sitting in my own house for the first time since the babies were born, and I have no support. It is me with that baby looking at me saying, what are you going to do now? Well, the humility over the last 5 days has just been my willingness to stop and recognize, hey, I don't know how to take care of a baby. And honestly, at this moment, I still don't know how to take care of a baby. But I know just a little bit more than I did 5 days ago when they were born. And I know tomorrow I'll know just a little bit more, because we do have the advantage of having people with the experience that we are looking to gain existing in this world today. The only question is, are we willing to go out into the unknown, where practically speaking, we are responding to questions with, I don't know, rather than spending time in our comfort zone exclusively, where we feel comfortable because our knowledge is at an all-time high and we are actually in a position to share rather than be poured into. I mean, case in point, there is nothing new under the sun. Innovation is simply a product of prior experience. Things get better with time, but ultimately there is a sharing that has to come. So the question that I had to ask myself over these last 5 days as a new dad is, am I willing to not know what I think I should know. Because until I'm willing to do something about that, I am never going to grow as a man, as a husband, as an athlete, as a father, because there's only a certain finite amount of knowledge that Bo Parrish possesses. This is a great, big, huge, dynamic world. And the world would be a boring place if we all looked alike, thought alike, did the same things, engaged in the same routines. So, my case in point is there's a lot of knowledge to be gained out there. The only question is, can we humble ourselves to put ourselves in a position where we can become the beneficiary of that knowledge? And you know, Dave, kind of pointing the arrow back at you. I mean, let's just consider the trajectory of your career. I mean, here you were a professional trained in multimedia, used to be a news anchor for a traditional news channel, and you hit your groove. You were doing fantastic. You were broadcast all over the country, and now you're in somewhat of a similar role, but you're doing it on your own. And you've made this transition from news anchor at a local TV station to creating your own multimedia empire online. And you've done quite well. But can you talk a little bit about that process? I mean, surely it just didn't happen overnight that you just flipped a switch and all of a sudden you knew everything you had to do to create your own personal platform. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the humility that was involved as you made that transition?
Well, I can tell you there's a lot of fear leaving that comfort zone of, 15 years in the professional world of broadcasting. There was also some pre-time, college and internships leading into broadcasting on a professional level. But, leaving that comfort zone and saying, I need to go out on my own because there was a passion for a different direction and also wanting to take upon myself the challenge. But I think what I didn't know is that everything I needed was already within me. And I had to humble myself and trust myself, but I couldn't avoid asking questions for fear of appearing weak or not knowing what I already knew. I just needed some direction, and I needed someone to help point out my strengths. And they were there, but it was just a matter of taking a different angle and recognizing what those strengths were. Because over time, the path that you and I are on, the path that people are on right now who are listening or watching, is not uncharted territory. Everyone has gone on the path we're going on, but it's so fearful because we haven't been on that path before. And the great thing is, people are excited to share their experience and their knowledge because they want to help. They want to help you succeed and take some pride in that. If I see you and I see some great potential in what you have, I want to bring it up to you and help you develop or recognize the confidence that's already in you. But it's a matter of putting that experience in action. And we've talked about the word action so many times in the past, but trusting yourself, trusting your experience. And I think that was the hardest thing to do at first, is to say, this is so corny, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and I can do this on my own. I just have to start doing it. And people are spinning their wheels sometimes, and let's put that wheel to the pavement and let's just go and see what happens. And I think you need to have trust in yourself and still humble yourself to ask questions. And it's okay to ask questions because it just may be a slight shift to get you on the right path, or because maybe you're just parallel that path and it's just a little bit of a shift, mindset, confidence, a boost, anything.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, here's a statement that I heard not too long ago, just to reiterate the thoughts that you just shared. Try this one on for size. Everyone has something to teach me if I'm humble enough to learn. What is it that's built inside of our gut that causes us to resist that whole learning process? Could it be a product of the education system, the way in which we were set single file in rows in classrooms for multiple years as young children and even teenagers, where one person stood at the room and pretty much read straight from the textbook? It was dry, it was boring, we had to be there, and now perhaps we're programmed to resist. Whereas The learning process is one of the most incredible, exciting journeys that any of us could ever take because it's uncharted territory. One of the movies that actually came on while we were in the hospital recovering with our babies was Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. And, it's funny, the first night we were there, it came on, and Marietta had never seen it before. And she goes, "What's the point of this movie?" And of course, I explained the premise that it's Bill Murray, who, appropriately speaking, was a news anchor who was assigned to go from a big city where he was used to a very small town called Puxatawney and cover the story of the groundhog. If the groundhog indeed saw its shadow, well, it meant that spring was right around the corner. If it didn't, well, 6 more weeks of winter. And indeed, that very night, a storm set in, and he was stranded in Puxatawney. Now, the irony in the movie is the next day, he wakes up at the exact same time in the same bed and breakfast, had the same conversation with the innkeeper, saw the same people on the street, and the movie goes on and on where essentially Bill Murray lives the exact same day in the exact same way. What is the fun of that? Routine, sure, it's comfortable, but as you and I have discussed multiple times on this podcast before, we were not created to live in a comfort zone. If so, the parameters or the boundaries of our world would be defined for us. It would be as if we were a dog in a yard with a shock collar. If we went outside of the boundaries, we would immediately get a shock and be forced to retreat to the familiarity of our surroundings. Life is an adventure, it's a journey, it's meant to be lived, and it's certainly not meant to be lived alone. It's too hard to learn everything we need to learn on our own. It is not a solo journey, and it's why we were created to spend life, most of us, with a wife and ultimately a family, that we too can share the knowledge that we've built with those that have come before us. So back to that statement, everyone has something to teach me if I'm humble enough to learn. Can you share any thoughts on that? Just perhaps your experience in this learning curve that has become in you setting out on your own journey, starting your own business, or perhaps when it comes to the sport of triathlon, or heck, even doing the elaborate YouTube videos that you've created over the last 2 to 3 years. How about that learning process?
I think what you do, and you're so right about the routine, and that's what got me so bored and uninspired, is doing the same thing over and over again in my previous career of reading the news, reading the same type of stories every day and not feeling like I was making a positive contribution and I had something more to give and I had something more that I wanted to explore and try. And seeking out, and this is what I tell people, if you want to break out of your current mold, is to seek people who are doing what you want to do. And I would seek out people who are following in the sport of triathlon, if it was in the form of journalism, following and covering, if it was making car review videos, who is doing that? How can I learn more about that? And before I even found those two side careers, I would speak to former news personalities or journalists who had left the business. And so for me, I was seeking out questions and the answers to my questions by people who had taken the path that I wanted to follow on. I wanted to start my own business. I wanted to be my own boss, and I wanted creativity and variety in my life, and I wanted to make my own name for myself and create my own brand. So I sought the advice of other people who were on the path that I wanted to be on. And my turn to throw the question back to you is how do you advise someone to recognize, or how do you talk to someone and point out their strengths? Because you did it for me, and I had to really kind of like, oh my gosh, you're right. There are things I know about this business that I didn't believe I already knew. That one statement, I don't know what I know, Bo. And you said, you kind of like were like, dude, you have to stop what you're doing right now and trust yourself. Keep it simple. Here's what you do well. Do that. Don't overthink it. Remember that?
No question. And, I'll mention something that you shared earlier when it came to ultimately making that transition from a traditional media background to your own multimedia platform online, is that you knew you had it in you. In other words, you knew you had the ability. It just had not been fully developed. After spending at a minimum of 3 years with you, having exposure to your background, I can clearly see the potential you have, and you're just now starting to tap into it. The reason that I can see that is because my purpose in this life is encouragement. I am a student of people. It gives me the greatest amount of joy and satisfaction to have a conversation with a perfect stranger on the street, and within a matter of 15 minutes, come to an understanding of what truly makes them tick. And that is simply a matter of quieting my own mind with my selfish thoughts and truly listening to what it is that is being shared with me. Because ultimately, one of our upper innermost needs in life is that of acceptance. Beyond our physiological, we need to feel like we're a part of something. And if you give anyone a chance, they will tell you. It's only a matter of time, and it's only a matter if you are willing to listen. They will tell you what is very most important to you. And I even go one step further and I simply ask, how can I help you turn that into reality? Because what breaks my heart is potential that is not pursued. Because potential is nothing more than wasted talent. The pursuit of potential is the only way that you are going to make it to your passion. It is clear that you are passionate about video production, about audio production, but you had to be nudged, encouraged, pushed in the right direction to get you to believe that you had it in you, what it took to develop this empire that you were slowly but surely building. And here's the thing that makes it even more challenging: it doesn't happen overnight. The vision that you have in your head right now of what it could be, it's not now. If it was now, it wouldn't be a risk. If you were given a map ahead of time, well, where would the adventure be? Where would the need for humility be if you knew exactly what it took at the exact right time? And that's another thing. Timing doesn't always go according to the way we think it should go. And I would actually say that change is actually a blessing in disguise. Do we have the patience to see it out? Do we have the humility to get back up again after we've failed, after we've experienced that pain? We said before that failure is fine as long as it's not final. Pain is part of the process of discovering your passion, because once you find your passion, you will know your true purpose in life. I shared with you before, and the reason I'm so passionate about encouragement is that I can see the potential inside of you. And I like to think that our friendship has been built around common interests, but then ultimately me being a huge advocate of what you're doing and encouraging you along the way. Because if we relied exclusively on our feelings and our ability to do everything, quote unquote, by ourselves, we would never get there. That's why humility and fellowship is so crucial to the development of our purpose in life. Because once we arrive at our purpose, it's up to us to give it away, to share, as you mentioned before, with those who express an interest in the path that we have just walked. It's not that we're any smarter. It's not that we're any more, it's not that we're any better. It's just we're further down that path than the person who has come before us.
I just recently bought an audiobook by a gal named Justine or Justine Azaric, and she's a very popular YouTube personality. And in her 5.5 hour audiobook, she talks about there is no such thing as an overnight success. And even though she has 2 or 3 million subscribers on YouTube, it was a path that took a lot of practice, a lot of experience, and a lot of trial and error before she got to the point where she is successful now. And people would say to her, you are an overnight success, or your videos went viral. And she says, it really is just a compilation of everything I've learned. And in my example, what I'm telling you now is that I sought out someone like that to teach myself of what it takes to get where I want to go. And to, I guess, echo your point, is that it doesn't happen overnight. It does take time, and it is a process, whether it's a 3, 5, or 10-year plan. And if you were to look back and take stock in what you have, your talents and skills, and recognize that, and humble yourself to say, this is these are the overall the platform that I have, skill set or whatever, and look at that and say, how can I apply this to the future? Am I on the right track? And that was my example of someone who I want to follow. So I sought out an example of someone who's doing what I want to do, and I would encourage other people to do the same.
And that is a wonderful example, which I think is a great point to close on, is that you don't have to have a personal relationship to be mentored. You found this audiobook based on an interest that you had. You identified a lady who had done exactly what you're trying to do, and you sought that out, and as a result was a beneficiary of the production that she had created. So how about this? And just in closing here, humility has everything to do with your willingness to invite others into your personal journey of your better self. Your better self ultimately leads to your purpose, because all of us, no matter how successful or significant we are, still have a desire to do more, to share more, to be more, because ultimately we are social creatures created for fellowship. The journey was never be meant to travel alone. We were created to share the experiences, the thoughts, the wealth, the life experience with those that have gone before us. It's a matter of our willingness to embrace what we don't know, and one step further, to ask of those who we know do know. Let me say that again. It's our willingness to ask of those who we know that do know that which we do not know. But it's only temporary, because the more we surround ourselves with those who have walked the path we are looking to path, not only does our humility grow, but our personal experience benefit from the collaboration, the mentoring, the shared experience will ultimately lead us in the path that we want to go from the deepest depths of our hearts.
Bo Parrish, thanks very much. Great talk on humility.
Looking for a great at-home sauna at a great price? Get 5% off any indoor or outdoor sauna, cold plunge, or infrared sauna from Almost Heaven with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at checkout. For over 40 years, Almost Heaven saunas have been trusted as the top American home sauna manufacturer. Almost Heaven saunas deliver high-quality products and firmly stands behind the holistic benefits the sauna brings to your mind and your body. Again, get 5% off any order with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at almostheaven.com. There's also a direct link below this video.